keep a digital copy for you on Google Classroom. So right now it's like the top thing that would be on the stream at the beginning of the page. But also if you go to the weekly syllabi part, that's where you'll have all the weekly syllabi throughout the course of the year. So I'll continue to make paper copies, but I really only want to make paper copies for those who would use them and not like throw them away. So in here, who would like a paper copy of a weekly syllabus? And then the idea is I continue to make them. I'd make enough for each week so that next week when week number 4 is on there, you could pick it up. If it's not something that you're going to use, then you don't have to worry about it. Okay, so you guys are good. You're Ryan, you welcome. A couple quick things on here just to understand, since we've taken a look at it, whether you're looking at paper copy or what's on screen. Today we'll go over obviously stuff with Heart of Darkness, and that's going to continue on into next week. You're going to finish it for Monday. Monday we are going to have an actual reading check quiz. It's not going to be an essay, I think you swear, on that one. So it'll be a reading check quiz. Reading check quiz would only be for part 3. So it's not parts 1 and 2 and then some stuff about 3. But it would solely be the stuff that goes on in part number 3. Typically, and I'm not saying this to make it sound like cryptic and stuff like that, typically a reading check quiz would fall like in that 10 to 15 point range, which is what Mondays is going to be. You're not going to get a reading check someday that's like 55 points or anything like that. You didn't do anything wrong to get the essay yesterday. I knew I was going to do that, so don't like read too much into that. You're going to get the essays back tomorrow, and we'll kind of talk about, why I did it that way and how the whole scoring and all that kind of stuff works. Along those lines, you'll probably notice grades fluctuating tonight, and that doesn't mean that they're all going to go tumbling down, but this is your first essay assignment. Essays make up half of your grade. So no matter what, there's going to be some fluctuations take place, because right now, that piece of paper, or 2 pieces of paper for you, is half of your grade. But as we do more essay assignments, those things will kind of start to stabilize. So I don't want anyone going into panic attack or anything like that, or like overall euphoria as to, yes, I have 100%, this is awesome, because those things will probably kind of start to change a little bit over the course of time. That's one of the things I'll go over again tomorrow. It's going to look like it's 100 points. It's not. I set it to look like 100 because then I can put in percentages. So that rubric, or that the writing scale that's in your syllabus, it's easier to go, okay, this is a 72% instead of a funky decimal kind of number. So it's going to look like 100 points. It's actually going to be 40 points. Traditionally, a take-home essay, like what you're doing for East of Eden, 60 points. We do an in-class essay about a book, 40 points. We do an in-class essay that's not about a book, but it's like a past AP problem, so it doesn't align with anything that we're really doing in class, that's 30 points. And then there's some other kind of things that come along the way. But typically it goes 30, 40, 60. So this was in-class essay, TWA, typewriting assessment, about a text that you're reading, so that's where it gets 40 points. Did anyone recognize the prompt? Hannah, you remember where you saw it? It was in your course syllabus. So that was like the writing assignment for Heart of Darkness. So that means you have done your writing assignment for Heart of Darkness. You don't have another essay to do. See how much better you feel now? Now, typically, we don't really do a whole lot of like comprehension multiple unit tests when it comes to the books we read. You did one for East of Eden. You are going to do one for Heart of Darkness. You did one for East of Eden because it was summer read. And I do one for Heart of Darkness because I don't want Ryan going, well, I did my essay, I'm done with the book. No, you have a reading checklist for part 3, and we'll still do a test for the whole entire book. Normally, though, and this would hold true with the next, X number of books that we do, you're doing your writing assignments when it's done. So normally you have a writing assignment, not a multiple choice test. It just feels like you always have multiple choice tests because it's the first 3-4 weeks of school. But we'll do that next Friday. Your East of Eden essays, just so you're not getting confused, where it says turnitin.com when it gets submitted next week, I haven't given you our class code or anything like that for Turnitin. I'll probably give that to you on Friday when we do the peer editing. I just didn't want people getting confused as to whether or not you were supposed to submit your rough drafts to Turnitin. So I was waiting until we got done with the rough drafts. Friday, I'll give you the stuff for Turnitin. I think most, if not all of you already have a setup with Turnitin. You just need to be able to link your account to the class, and that's when you'll, how and where you'll submit your overall final faculty score needs to be. We'll talk about on Friday. So really, I would say from now till Friday, I'd focus on East of Beaton essay, and then over the weekend you can knock out part 3 of Heart of Darkness and should be okay with that kind of pacing. All right. Any schedule questions or anything like that? Also, probably do this on Friday. I'll mention it to you tomorrow maybe. We need to sign up for my AP, the classroom. So make sure your iPads with you today, tomorrow. We'll probably take 5 minutes one of those days and get you kind of signed up with it. We'll get a laptop or something, or you can do it on phone if you have access with it. It's not going to be a big deal. All right. Any questions? Or just hijack his.
I like that.
All right, so typically when we go over a book that we're reading in class, when we start off with it, I always have a couple things that I want to make sure we touch on. But when we start off, I kind of open up with, all right, what are any kind of questions, concerns, areas of confusion? You can't say everything when it comes to the book as a whole. To maybe kind of lessen some confusion, quick little map that's on here. The area where we would be looking at is, there we go, right here in this center point. So this would be very slowly, maybe, there we go. This part here would be the Congo River. So the Nile is over here. This here is the Congo River. It has that snake-like shape, which Marlowe kind of hints towards, that it always kind of charmed him like a snake. But it's a very treacherous kind of path that would be going along. The main places that he's going to be headed to, this does not look good, is at the coast is where you would have Outer Station, and then we're making rough guesses that you would have Central Station roughly halfway more inside the heart of the continent, and then you would have the Inner Station towards the end of the river. This looks really depressing. So number 2 here would be Central Station, and then Inner Station would be over here. Keep in mind, this is a pretty long journey that he's doing. It takes him about a month to get from Europe to the coast. So this is roughly about 30 days. This is a 200-mile journey from Outer to Central Station, which takes him like 15 days to walk because the river isn't deep enough really to sail on. What's the big problem when he gets to Central Station? So far as his ship? It's like underwater, and he needs rivets, lots of them, and it takes forever. He's stuck here for like 3 months, waiting for all those rivets and the supplies and the repairs in order to take. And then it's about like another 30-day journey for him to get to where Inner Station is going to be. So, while his tale is taking place on a ship, maybe over the course of a couple hours, this is a multi-month experience that is kind of going on for him at this point. With number 1 being Outer Station, we don't get a whole lot in the way of character names, but who would be an individual that is definitely at the Outer Station? Who would be like the main person we would associate that would normally be housed there? Again, we're not getting names, we're getting titles. It's not the manager. We're almost to him. Someone before the manager. Accountant is the guy who's at the Outer Station. Remember what the accountant's always wearing? Yep, he's always like in that starch white. So Outer Station is where you have the accountant. This is that guy dressed in white. Ryan, then when we get to Central Station, that's where we get your buddy, the manager. And you have like the manager's uncle shows up and all that kind of stuff. I'd say there's another person that's of fair importance that Marlowe kind of talks to a little bit at Central Station. Pretty much a buffoon. Not Brady. I just figured people would kind of say that. No. I say buffoon and you go lawyer. Matty wants to be a lawyer. Sandy, anything? No. He makes something. The brickmaker who doesn't make bricks. This could be a good career path. And then inner station is where ultimately we're going to find Kurtz. Pinky swear he shows up in the book. It will happen. You've been waiting patiently and waiting and waiting. Part 3, he'll be there. So, not that again these are the only characters, but something to at least kind of associate with them. Outer station, accountant. Central station, this is where his boat's underwater. Rivets, manager, brickmaker. Inner station, in the heart of the darkness. This is Kurt's, basically abode at that point. All right. What are logistical questions? What are areas where things kind of got hazy for you or a little bit foggy so far as following along? But what are some things here that we want to kind of square away?
In the beginning, whenever he's talking about going to Africa, is he talking about going to the banks on the west side, or is he talking about in the actual ocean?
Do you mean like when he's like as a child when he's thinking about going, or like when the actual journey is starting?
He's actually starting.
Okay, so indirect answer for you. What's kind of like a Marlowe timeline? And I don't mean like him kind of starting on the Nelly, but like when he's actually kind of going through his whole story, where does he have to start? Where does this begin?
In terms of the story,
Yeah.
he's on the ship.
Well, not like in terms of his actual story, not him on the ship talking to our unnamed narrator. And this is where it gets kind of complicated because Mr. Conrad doesn't give us a whole lot of detail. Like, what's some of the things that he has to take care of before he's able to actually begin his journey, I guess would be a good way of kind of phrasing it. What are some of the I's that need dotted and the T's that need crossed? Okay, so he has to essentially go to the company, and at the company you get the necessary paperwork, and there is where he's going to get his physical that is taking place. So this kind of starts off at the, quote unquote, and he does all caps for it, the company office. Now, Douglas, to your original question, is this like where you're, like, at this point when the journey's going to take place, does he know he's going to be going to the west coast of the continent, or are you talking about like before?
I was talking like does he arrive there, or does he arrive somewhere else?
In Africa?
Yeah.
West Coast. So his first job is he's going from essentially the company office, the ships, to the west coast of Africa. And then from the west coast, and he would know that this is going to be the plan pretty much the whole time, figured that was going to happen. From the west coast, then he knows that he's going to have to work his way in order to get into that interstation. So he doesn't have any notions that he's going to hop on a ship and he's going to be where Kurtz is and all that kind of stuff from the get-go. He doesn't really even know what his mission is yet at this point. It's just something that he wants to do because maps have always charmed him and he's always wanted to explore which spaces. He likes Taylor Swift songs. But he always wants to go to the blank spaces and kind of explore these things. Keep in mind, he is an explorer at heart. So what does he want to do? Go places that other people, haven't been. So it's not so much, what is the goal of the mission, but it's kind of like that experience of the journey is something that he's going to look at.
I was just going to say the North Pole.
Yeah, that was one that he specifically talks about, and then goes, you know what? That's probably not going to happen for me anymore at this point. But yeah, that idea of just going to that uncharted territory is something that would be of interest to him. Any idea where the company station, because he doesn't tell us specifically. Where's company office? What would be our educated guess? Let's get more specific. You're right.
England?
Nope. This isn't fit the answer sheet. What adjective goes in front of Congo?
Oh,
Belgian Congo. So he's probably, company offices are going to be in the country of Belgium. Specifically, they're probably going to be in the city of Brussels, which is the capital. You're shaking your head no for it. No, it doesn't, but on page 73, it does give us a little bit of a description. This is your million bonus point question here, Ryan. You could cement your grade for the rest of the year. How does he describe the city? What does it remind him of? Always make sure you ask big bonus point questions to people you're pretty sure don't know the answer.
What was that page again?
Oh, it can't tell you. Want to know how he describes the city? It's on 73. Where he's looking for it. See, once you're looking, you'll lost your bonus points.
That's fine.
That's good. You're still making it educated. It's in that first full paragraph, I think, on 73. It's a city that always reminded him. Looks like Douglas beat you. Maddie wants to arm wrestle for it. You can say the first word.
Sepulcher?
You got easier words
Yeah,
to say there.
Did I say it right?
Yeah, you did. You did pretty good. Anyone
How
know
do you
what?
remember that?
You remember that?
I said, how do you remember that? Because I sure didn't.
Well, that's the difference between standing and sitting. Anyone know what a sepulcher is? I guess. Give you one. No? Okay. It's basically a tomb. It's a whited sepulcher. It's a tomb. If it's whited, what's on the outside of it, most likely? White stuff. No. Marble. It's a grand, it's almost like a mausoleum, kind of thing. We'll get into this here in a little bit. But basically, the city reminds him of a tomb. Stella, is that a place you want to go visit? Why not? Okay, so certainly you are getting a pretty negative connotation with it. At the company office, Ryan, you mentioned that he has to go get his physical. What is one of the things that the doctor really wants to get some data on, some information? Wants to get circumference of the skull. Because what's the expectation that's going to happen when he returns? If he returns, it's going to get smaller because he's going to be with the quote-unquote primitive natives, and so his mental capacities are going to go down and shrink. So you have skull measurements that take place, or skill measurements. Besides the doctor with the physical, there are two other people that he takes note of within the office. And this is when you had a Tale of Two Cities flashback.
It's the two women, one fat and the other slim, sat on straw bottom chairs knitting black.
So you got the two knitting women with black wool. Let's put on our AP English language hats, and if I go, hey, you got an illusion taking place here, what could that illusion be? It does. Writers tend to do this. It's a typical tool in their tool belt. What do we know about knitting women allegorically, symbolically within stories and whatnot? Pardon? Faith. Specifically, like you have three women, Greek Roman mythology, the Fates. because as they measure and then they cut it. So measure string, cut, measure string, cut, measure string, cut, measure Mr. Kane. Don't have enough. Oh. So it essentially is measuring your depth. Where do they work? Where do they reside? In Stella's favorite place, a tomb. Why go with black wool? What lives are getting cut? The people of Congo, Africa, the natives, the indigenous folks who were there. So you have, the white women, you have the white imperialists, the accountant all dressed in white. What is he doing? Measuring wool, not white wool, but black wool, because these are the people who are pretty much going to get, used and abused. When he first gets to the outer station, one of the group, he kind of refers to it as like a death grove that he comes across, where he sees all the natives and they're basically lying there, just kind of starting to waste away. And what's around the neck of one of them? Not chain. It's a W word. He says it's worsted, which is basically naval rope, shipping rope. But basically, there's this big white rope that is going around his neck, almost as if it's a noose that he's kind of being choked and hanged and all this kind of stuff, by that white imperialism that's taking place. So he really kind of starts to set up this symbolic, kind of aspect that this isn't going to be a good thing. And this is why I would also say he purposely kind of goes with this. Because not only are you going, hey, here's a tomb. Hey, why is white an appropriate color for it? Okay, white imperialists, and we don't know it yet, at this point on page 73, but we certainly know it now. What's the primary substance that we are taking? We're taking iron. Okay, so we got this whited sepulcher. This illusion, I would say, he also is kind of playing with, because where does he get this phrase? He's taking it from New Testament, when Jesus is yelling at the Pharisees, calling them hypocrites, comparing them to tombs, which, they look beautiful on the outside, but within are full of dead men bones with lies and deceit and all of that kind of stuff. That phrase certainly would be one that folks would be recognizing. And so when you go back to taking a look at Brussels, it's filled with dead men's bones, because there's really not any truth, any real stuff that's going on there.
I thought people in the Tale of Two Cities were just taking names of people they killed. How does that?
Well, the idea that you do have, you have the Fates reference that is coming up with Tale of Two Cities. So it's not that he's hoping that you go, hey, remember Dickens in this book, but the idea that this would not be an uncommon allusion that's going to take place. Most allusions tend to be biblical or tend to be dealing with Greek, Roman mythology, not because the assumption is that you necessarily believe all those things, but they tend to be universal stories. And so it's something that you're able to kind of pull with. And keep in mind, the typical question then, well, did the writer think to do that on purpose? Yeah, he or she just thought of it, though, because that's a skill, that's a craft, something that is going to be more apt for them to pull out than, say, you or I sitting down and writing and going, okay, I need an illusion, what do I do? It's just one that kind of naturally starts to take place. But this is where he's going to be starting company office, and then is when we're getting down, into the other parts and into the actual continent. Kind of going with this skull measurement idea when it comes to, sanity. Why do they need him? Him being Marlowe. Besides, I need you to cap the boat. Why is there an opening? All of the above. Yep, he's dead. And he actually gets a name. You get Marlowe, you get Kurtz, $500,000. Oh, fresh letter, took too long. But why does he die? He gets in a dispute with the chief over hens, chickens. Well, that's pointless. That's dumb. That's the point. The idea is that by going into there, you lose all rational thought, logic, sanity, and crazy things are going to happen. You're going to pick a fight over chickens. Oh, we got an opening. Why don't you come on in? Let's measure your head before you go, just to see what happens.
I still don't get that because your skull doesn't move.
Sure, it doesn't. But what you're taking a look at is essentially, and this isn't going to be uncommon in the 1800s, 1700s, is it's the term would be scientific racism. You look for things to validate a preconceived notion that you already have. And you'll have, I don't want to say like the same thing, but similar concepts that, are all present in the U.S. in the 1880s, the 1890s, the 1900s, early 1900s, where you're trying to scientifically establish why one, whether it be race, gender, group of people, are mathematically superior to others. No, it doesn't make sense. But, and this can kind of go with any kind of sustained media propaganda. If you keep saying the message enough times over and over and over again, people start to believe it. What's the white man's burden? So far as imperialism, from notes that you were doing over the weekend?
Spreading Christianity.
Part of it's going to be spreading Christianity. Part of it is employment. Look at these opportunities, lifting up the lower races, people, civilizations. It's a PR campaign. There's no validity or truth to it. But if it keeps getting said and spread over and over again, hey, look what we're doing with imperialism. Good stuff is happening. And then you come across a guy like hers. So no, there is no logic to it. But it's part of the media, part of the, I shouldn't say media, but part of the campaign as to validate why this should be happening. The validation for it is resources. Yeah. What else? Things that you notice, questions. I'm always tempted to do a one-question reading check quiz. Who's the narrator? You don't like that book.
No, it's just a bunch of people bouncing stuff.
That's our author.
Where's the else?
That's a good name to go with. You didn't say Nellie, so that's good.
Are they unidentified?
Yeah. I mean, so you have, we start off on the ship. Years ago, I had an essay where the person explained the narrator, Nellie, is telling us a story. Clearly, they were wrong. What's the Nellie? That's the ship. Good. Where is the Nellie when the story opens? It's in England. How do you know? That we do know. Like, we actually get something specific. Because what's the body of water that this thing's floating on?
Thames.
It's on the Thames River. Or River Thames if we're going to be properly British. Okay? So we have our narrator kind of talking about this, and then you end up getting the story that Marlowe gives. So you have Marlowe's story. The setup, the structure of this is called a frame tale because Marlowe's story is essentially framed by the commentary of our unnamed narrator. And so, and this isn't like an unusual thing to do, but it's certainly not typical. Could Conrad have gone with Marlowe telling the whole story in first-person point of view? And the majority of the book would be the same? Yeah. You get rid of those quotation marks in front of every paragraph that like throws, oh, who's talking? Oh yeah, Marlowe is. But he doesn't do that. Which gives the follow-up question, everyone's favorite three letters. Why? Why, Maddie? Why? Honest answer? To make me suffer. We don't entirely know. What would be different if Marlowe were the sole narrator? Probably not a whole lot. What does this add to it? Well, that's kind of incomplete. I'd say that's something that I think as we finish it, you end up kind of find out a little bit more. Well, one thing I would say, if Marlowe were the sole narrator, so this person, is out of the picture, they're not there, who really is going to be the sole person impacted by Marlowe's story? Well, beyond him. He already knows what's going to happen. Say the reader, how Ryan is going to be impacted. How's Grace going to be impacted? How's Tori going to be impacted? It's just going to be you. You're not really going to know anything else. By having this person, what is a possible effect? We see Marlowe's story, not only how it would impact us, the reader, but is there any kind of change? Is there anything that happens to the narrator at the end that would differ from the beginning? That's a question, too, where, Maddie, you can shrug, because chances are you're not at the end, yet. But, what is the impact that the story has on him is a good place to start. Because when the book does kind of open, and you're looking over the first couple pages when the unnamed narrator's dominating, especially on pages 66, 67, what's really the content of the narrator's story? Oh, this place is awesome. Think of this river. All the people that have gone from here, the explorers, whether it be Sir Francis Drake, or we're taking a look at Franklin going off to the North Pole. Who cares that he died and a crew was mutinous? But think of all these wonderful people that have been here. Look at the Oz of England, the city, the Industrial Revolution, all this kind of stuff. And then Debbie Downer Marlowe interjects with what's his opening lines that he says on 67? First time he speaks.
And this also has been one of the dark places of the earth.
Wait till I kill the mood. Why has it been one of the dark places of the world? Well, who were the first people to explore England? Romans came up in their ships, the legionnaires. They had to go into uncharted territory and fight the Gauls. What do we know about the Gauls? Who knows? Bunch of savages, beasts, all of that kind of stuff. Mystic qualities about them and whatnot. So you have the narrator going, I love England, this place is awesome. And then Marlowe's going, and we too were one of the dark places. Now, let me tell you about one of my travels into one of the dark places. And so he kind of does a parallelism between his journey in the Congo and the ship that's now kind of traveling along the River Thames. So you have this opening, England's great, Marlowe going, this is a dark place. Let's see how the narrator is feeling by the time it's all said and done. And what is it that is going to link Marlowe's journey to the ship actually being in England, London? We're not too sure yet at this point. But based on the things that we know that have kind of happening with Brussels, based on things that we kind of know so far as description of Kurtz and whatnot, you have things that tend to look pretty good, but when you get to the center of it, there's not a whole lot there. What do we know about Kurtz? It's pretty much hearsay, but what do we know about Kurtz? And you can think of like what you were reading yesterday.
He's like the master of ivory collection and selling.
This is like the tycoon, Mr. Moneybags kind of guy. This guy gets more ivory than anyone else. I have no idea how. Why? Who's impressed by him? I don't mean Marlowe. But like of the folks that we drew, or not drew, but that we mentioned here on the map, of this group of people, who really likes Kurtz? Or would be impressed by what Kurtz is able to do? Because he can bring in more than anyone else. He sort of. He does like Kurtz, and he wants Kurtz's favor, but this is the guy, the accountant, who really likes him, because what's the accountant do? Count numbers, figures, money. This guy turns out more ivory than any place else. This guy, manager, and his uncle, what's their thought towards Kurtz? Ryan, you're shaking your head. They don't like him. How's he do it? He's making us look bad. Jealousy, all this kind of stuff. The brickmaker realizes that Kurtz carries a lot of weight. So, when he's talking to Marlowe, hey, can you put in a good word for me? I think I might be able to get a promotion. But what does he do? Absolutely nothing. So he doesn't deserve anything, but he thinks he should be promoted. You would think that this is a well-oiled machine that's going on. We can't get rivets. The boat's underwater. So this imperialistic journey is essentially a mess, and this is the one guy who's able to take care of business. But how does he do so? Well, based on some of the things that you folks were mentioning yesterday, high seat among the devils of the land and all that kind of stuff. What does he have to do in order to accomplish his goal? Bad stuff. Don't ever write that on an essay. Bad stuff, but that goes with for now. Nothing. What's Kurtz look like?
He's bald. He's really down.
Impressively bald. What is he? He's the incarnate, essentially, of Ivory. He has been consumed so much by his evil greed and power that he has basically become the human form of Ivory. A lot of you yesterday, I'd say one of the more dominant devices people were mentioning, and rightfully so, was personification. Because who gets personified, or what gets personified? A lot in that passage. The wilderness, the jungle, it's kind of patting him on the head. You get an interesting split. The wilderness gains human attributes and characteristics, but what happens to Kurtz? He loses it, and he gets absorbed by it. He gets consumed by it, and so to the point where he's almost not even kind of human anymore. Hence, he's among the devils of the land, the evil qualities that are out there. What you could argue has happened to Kurtz? He has gone. And, I don't mean this in seriousness, Doug, but has he changed physically? Has there been a change in his skull? That would be the assumption. Look what happens to you when you go out there. You become a totally different person. And it seems that Kurtz is dwindling. He's losing his human qualities.
I was just gonna say, like, could there be a parallelism between the weighted, I don't know how to say that.
Sepulcher.
Because, like, there's not, like, he's so white and there's not really anything in there besides, like, because he's, like, the devil, it's just, like, bones of a man, like, there's not really anything.
Yeah, and you're going to get it, like, when you actually see him, they're going to go into a little bit more detail about him, and it's kind of interesting how that happens. I think something that kind of goes along with that and ties with the brickmaker does have a physical object that Marlowe is kind of entranced by. He's got something from Kurtz that Kurtz does before he goes off into the inner station, before he's kind of been consumed by this. Remember what it is?
Isn't it a piece of writing? Or something?
Well, we got a couple different things. There's the manuscript that he comes across in the little hut that's written in cipher, that's written in code. He mentions, and we had this in the passage from yesterday, the report that he does, where he describes it as being eloquent and whatnot. And then we have something that's a little more artistic. He has a canvas with a sketch that's done in oils. It's a painting. What's the painting? It's of a person. It's of a female. Female, what you have on her face? It's fun when people think see eyes going down below. What's on the painting? That might be something we take a look at, or we'll talk a little bit about tomorrow. But the painting that he sees with the brickmaker, I would certainly say, because this is something that has been done by Kurtz. Kurtz's painting certainly has some symbolic value to it, and I think it gives you a little bit of an idea as to the change that kind of starts to undertake Kurtz. Big question that I think some folks should ask is, why does Marlowe seem to like this guy? Because he seems like a rotten individual. Why would you go, I'd like to meet him?